What's going on, guys? Welcome to another video. In this video, we are going to be doing a deep dive into the flat bar to drop bar conversion on this Specialized Hardrock vintage mountain bike. Now, in part one of the series, we did an overview of this build and we started to take it out for a ride and review it. But in this video, what I want to do is talk about all of the steps required that you might need to take a bike from flat bars to drop bars that you see here. Now, I want to talk first about this frame. It has a lot of personal significance to me. Now, the frame itself doesn't hold a lot of monetary value. These are relatively inexpensive and you can pick them up on Craigslist or on Facebook Marketplace for pretty cheap. But this bike reminds me of my childhood. When I was a little kid, my dad used to take me to the BMX track and we would ride bikes together. And at the time, sometimes he would ride with me, and the bike that he had was a Specialized Hardrock. Now, my brother still has that bike, so that's pretty awesome. But when I saw that my neighbor was giving this bike away, I asked her if I could have it because it just reminded me of, that time that I spent learning how to ride bikes with my dad. The bike itself has 26-inch wheels, it has rim brakes, it originally came with a triple chain set in the front, now I'm running it with a 1x. A lot of the parts that are on this bike are from my commuter that I had when I was living in New York, but when I moved, I sold that bike and I decided to keep some of the parts in case I wanted to build up a project in the future. So let's get into the build process now. Alright, so I'm loosening up the cables for the brake. This is the front brake. I also do the rear brake. And I'm loosening the cable for the rear derailleur, so that's the shift cable. Next, I'm going to free all of the cables from the frame. That makes disassembly a lot easier. Now, I've already removed the grip from the handlebars. So here where I'm starting to loosen up the shifter pod and the brake lever, it becomes really easy to take those things off. Next, I'm loosening the clamp that holds the handlebar, and then using a flathead screwdriver, I'm prying the clamp apart so that it's easy to remove the handlebars without scratching them. I'm being very careful there. Now I'm removing the drop style handlebars from the old stem that they were on, so I can install them into the quill stem that's already mounted in my frame. Again, I'm being very careful to just slide the bars through without scratching them. And then I use the flathead screwdriver to help center the bars. I tighten this bolt loosely because I'm going to adjust it later. And now I'm going to install the shifter cable into the shifter brake lever. It takes a little bit of figuring out, especially if it's your first time doing that, but everything lines up, so it kind of makes sense. Then you install it onto the handlebars. First look with the drop bars, it's actually looking pretty awesome. I'm excited about it. Now getting into installing the housing. This is the shifter housing. Now I actually go through the process of installing the shifter cable here without realizing that I needed the inline barrel adjuster to help dial in tension on the shifting. So I put it through all the guides and I install it into the rear derailleur, but I actually have to undo it all so I can put in that inline barrel adjuster. Now, the inline barrel adjuster that I bought was actually for brake cables, and brake cable housing is 5mm, and I think shifter cable housing is 4mm. So I'm using electrical tape here to basically create a snug fit for the shifter housing when I put it in the brake cable barrel adjuster. Now, the barrel adjusters work in the exact same way for both shifters and brake cables, so I figured it would work, and I'm actually pretty happy with the result. So again, just using electrical tape. And then this is the barrel adjuster. It's a small part. They cost about $16. And it fits snugly. Turning it counterclockwise adds tension, turning it clockwise loosens the tension, and that's how you help dial in your shifting. Now I'm feeding that shifter cable through the housing, back through the guides on the frame. This is the housing that's attached to the rear derailleur. Just being careful not to split the ends of the cable. And then I pull everything through. I use a plier and a rag. That just adds a little bit of tension to the cable and helps you pull it in easily. And then tightening. Now I'm installing all the brake cables. So similar to the shifter cable, you feed it into the area that it's supposed to go in, and then there's an end on the cable that just snugs in, and that's how you know it's installed properly. Here I'm adjusting my brakes. I didn't want to show you the whole process, but it takes a little while. Okay, and now I'm going to change tires. So what I have currently on the bike are Simworks tires. They're great tires, but they're a little bit off-road oriented. And I had these Compass Rat Trap Pass tires that are 26 by 2.3, and they're slick. So it's like riding on clouds. And I've had them for a few years and I never really used them, so I wanted to install them on this bike. Compass, which is now known as Rene Hurst, they get their tires made by Panaracer, and Panaracer tires are just awesome to work with because they have super soft, supple sidewalls, so it makes installation on the rim a lot easier. Here I'm just pumping the tire up to make sure that the bead is installed properly, and I'm examining that. You can actually see around the edge of the tire where the bead seats, and then installing it back onto the bike. Now I'm going to repeat the same process for the front wheel. And again, I'm taking off this Simworks Homage tire. I love these tires too. I just wanted to try something else out. And then installing the front wheel back onto the bike. Now I'm putting the chain on because I'm going to get ready to dial in the shifting. So I'm running a 38 tooth chainring in the front, and I'm running an 11 to 36 in the rear, and I'd like to change that to either an 11 to 40 or an 11 to 42, so I can have a really good climbing gear. This bike is really, really heavy, so having a good climbing gear is important. I gotta trim up some of the cables. We'll put some cable ends on them, get it looking a little bit more cleaned up, and then tomorrow morning we'll take it for a spin. So I like to take the bike off the stand and then stand over it so I can test to see if the bars are at the right angle. And that's up to personal preference, honestly. Alright, so this was the most important part of the build. It was getting this inline barrel adjuster here for dialing in cable tension for shifting. So in a previous video that I did, I talked about how you can use 10-speed road levers with a 10-speed mountain bike rear derailleur for SRAM, but the only thing is you need to have a barrel adjuster like this one to dial in cable tension so that you can get your shifting correct on this bike, because it doesn't have a barrel adjuster here where the cable goes into the derailleur body. So that's a big part of getting shifting to work if you are running road levers with a mountain bike rear derailleur, but that, again, only compatible for SRAM 10-speed stuff. I've gotten the shifting fairly dialed. It was a little bit finicky, but I think I got it. So it's shifting up into the big cog. Looks pretty good. All right, now that the shifting is dialed, we're going to install the bar tape. This is actually one of my favorite parts of the build. One, because we're getting done with it and it's like, you know, really close to feeling that sense of accomplishment. But two, it's really meditative, and this is a great way to make your bike look complete. Finishing bar tape can be kind of a challenge, especially working around the lever hoods and the levers, but there are some great tutorials online. Part.2 has a great tutorial that shows you a couple of different methods for wrapping bar tape. I'm sure GCN or one of the other big bike channels might have them too. I just try to keep even tension and spacing as I'm going. I also look at the work of Cutlass Velo. He's a local bike builder and wheel builder, and he does a great job of finishing the bar tape. So I just try to like match what he's doing. I like to use electrical tape as the finishing tape instead of what comes in the package. I tend to think that it holds a little bit better, and you can wrap it around a few times so that you get a more snug finish to the tape. These are so ugly. Let's go with these. Yeah, those chrome bar ends, they don't look good. So I went with the black ones. I usually just keep them from like old bar tape jobs that maybe I take apart. Just have some extras on hand. This little extra piece of tape is to put behind the lever. That way, if you make any mistakes or there's any gaps, it helps cover them up, and so it makes the bar tape look continuous. I think that was a B, and I was just like trying not to move too much so that it would go away. And finishing up the tape. So close. Alright guys, I am editing this video right now, and there's a couple of things that I wanted to mention before the video ends. Now the first thing is that I am learning through making. I am not a bike mechanic by trade. I'm actually learning about working on my bikes through filming these videos. And as I was working, I thought it might be helpful to mention that there's a couple of tools that you could use to do this project. Now the first is this set of cable cutters. You're gonna need a set of cable cutters to be able to cut the brake cable, the shift cable, and the housing as well, and that'll get you a clean cut so that you have good shifting and braking performance. The second thing in terms of tools is you're gonna need a set of Allen keys, and these are metric, so they're like 3mm, 4mm, 5mm, and they have the knurled ends, so they're easy to get into harder to reach places. Now, this part, second part, is standards, and I'm sure my bike mechanic friends out there are like, oh, enough about standards, but when you're working with road bikes or mountain bikes, different manufacturers, Shimano, SRAM, Campagnolo, they all have either different measurements or tolerances, so you got to keep those things in mind when you're working on your bike. Now, for this project, the standards that you want to keep in mind are the clamp diameter on the stem as well as the clamp diameter on the handlebars. So for my bike, I'm using a 31.8mm stem clamp diameter with a 31.8mm handlebar clamp diameter. Older style stems have different clamp diameters, so you want to make sure that you're matching them with the right handlebars. The second set of standards that I want to talk about are you're going from mountain bike brake levers to road bike brake levers. And while the cables are essentially the same, a mountain bike brake cable has this more cylindrical end, where a road bike brake cable has this more tapered end. Now they snug into the brake lever, but you want to make sure that you have the right one for the job that you're doing. So if you're going to go from the mountain bike levers to the road bike levers, you want to make sure that you have a set of road bike brake cables. Whew. All right. Now that's it for this video. In the next part of the series, part 3, we're gonna take the bike out for a ride. We're gonna talk about the parts and components, and I'm gonna give you a review on the bike as it is currently. And I'm gonna talk about what it's like to convert a mountain bike, either a 26-inch mountain bike or an old hybrid, into something a little bit more modern, whether that's putting on newer components or upgrading it to handlebars, and what you might need to keep in mind when you're doing it yourself. Now, until next time, thank you so much for watching. Peace.